America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation.
And I'm Alfredo Ortiz, CEO of Job Creators Network.
Please subscribe to the show at Salem Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcast from. Alfredo, today we're going to be joined by Dave Brat, who's the dean at the School of Business at Liberty University. He's also done some work in the private sector for Arthur Andersen and for the World Bank. And he also served as a congressman from Virginia. So that should be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it's. I remember when he actually joined us on our Bring Small Business Back tour when he was a congressman. So great guy. And I'm excited to have him on the show.
Yeah, he's super smart and he's got a ton of energy. Before he comes on, though, the month of August, it was announced, and CPI actually rose faster than expected at 3.7%, with core coming in at 4.3%. So as much as the administration continues to kind of try to hijack the Bidenomics term as a positive term, I really think Bidenomics is synonymous with Bidenflation, and
Right.
it continues to just hurt everyday ordinary Americans.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I'm actually very excited that the president's going around the entire country labeling and branding his failure. I mean, this is like fantastic. I actually will be interested to look back and try to figure out which is the greatest branded failure. Is it New Coke or is it Bidenomics? I'm really not quite sure what it's going to turn out to be, but I'm just excited that he's actually branding his failure because, look, the American public knows it, that they're just a bunch of lies at this point, because what they feel and what they see at the food stores, grocery stores, at the pumps is a whole different story.
Yeah, I mean, with gas and food, gas is up, say, about 50% since he came into the administration. Food is up 20%. Overall prices, they average about 17%. And it's growing faster than Americans' wages. So we are all falling behind as a result of all of this inflation. And this latest surge is really more of his bad policy. And in the face of the surging oil prices that we're seeing, because we are seeing the cost of gas go up again, right. He actually is blocking drilling in Alaska, which could actually help bring down the cost of oil and also help us replenish the strategic reserves that he just drained last year in an effort to bring down costs. But at what cost? Did he put us at a disadvantage as far as our security goes? I know they had to stop actually filling the strategic reserves because the cost of gas got so high.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, it's one of the things that is just mind-boggling, because instead of trying to truly help the inflation issue, he's making it worse. I mean, it's going to be hovering around $100 a barrel. They're reaching out to Saudi Arabia and Russia and Iran, to basically, help us with our energy issues. I mean, we were completely independent just a handful of years ago under the Trump administration. And here we are today, basically, going to our adversaries and asking them for help with our energy needs. And so it's absolutely ridiculous. And I'm sorry, there's just so much wind and so much solar that's going to be able to power everything that we need. It's just not enough. I mean, we're going to need an all of the above energy strategy. We've said this time and time again. It's going to have to be nuclear. There's going to be, solar. There's going to be wind. I mean, but there also has to be, fossil fuel. I mean, it's just going to be a combination. And so I think this administration just is absolutely going in the wrong direction and really sending our country into a crash, in the direction of a crash course here that we're going to sorely feel.
Well, of course, I know that you, as well as a lot of others, economists, were speculating that we may see another take that pause off that the Fed had on for interest rate increases, which is obviously going to hurt our small businesses that need to get access to credit. But just before we bring Dave on, because I know he's coming on in a few minutes, we're also seeing that the jobs report for August, that Bidenomics is starting to weaken the labor market, because the August report showed that 187,000 new jobs were created in August, which is well below the 12-month average. And it marks the third consecutive month of fewer than 200,000. And what we're seeing consistently is these big adjustments down on previous months when they go back and kind of revise the reports. So June and July were revised down by 110,000 jobs. That is really significant.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it starts really questioning, some of these Bureau of Labor statistic numbers on jobs that are coming out. And so, that's why I like our poll, the Small Business IQ poll, because, it really is a good measurement of what our small businesses are doing. 2/3 of new job growth is in the hands of small business owners. And so they've been indicating to us all along, or especially for the past 6 months, that there's concern, there's cracks in this economy. And what's really frustrating whenever you hear people talk about, especially folks on the left, but even on our side, people are talking about how the consumer is so resilient. I shake my head because they tout the more the increase in spending that you're seeing on the consumer side. Look, I mean, people are spending more, but they're getting less goods and services. So the price levels are what still haven't come down. I mean, that's a 17% on the food prices, or 17% overall. You have inflation, the 20% on gas price. I mean, that are price levels, right? So the fact that it's just slowing down, it's not great. And so again, consumers are spending more, yes, but they're getting less for those dollars spent. And so that is not translating into a resilient and healthy consumer.
Well, I wonder how much longer we're going to actually hear by the Biden administration out there touting the word Bidenomics, because it's just not working at all.
Yeah.
It is time for our interview with Dave Brat. Dave gained, let me tell you a little bit about him before he comes on. Dave gained national attention when he won the Republican primary for Virginia's 7th congressional district in 2014. In the general election that same year, he defeated the incumbent Eric Cantor. I haven't heard that name in a really long time.
Yeah.
Who was the House Majority Leader at the time. This upset victory sent shockwaves through the political establishment. Brat served in the U.S. House of Representatives from 2015 to 2019, representing Virginia's 7th congressional district. And during his time in Congress, he was a member of the House Freedom Caucus, a group of conservative Republican members of the House of Representatives. He was also known for his fiscally conservative and libertarian-leaning policy positions. As we've said at the beginning of the show, of course, he's the dean of the School of Business at Liberty University. Dave, welcome to Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone.
Hey, thanks for having me, Alfredo and Elaine. Great to be with you guys.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Well, Dave, today CPI ticked up again, 3.7%. I got to ask you right off the bat, I mean, what's the Fed going to do? What do you think of all this?
Yeah, well, it's that is a pretty big move in my book, right? Because inflation was going down, and it was at 9, and it was going down toward the Fed target of 2, and so all the narrative was nice and in a bow tie. But the last couple rounds upticked a little bit, and today 0.5 point.
Yeah.
And then all of the major pieces were up, right? Food was up, fuel was way up, housing continues a 40-month consecutive rise. And the big thing is, everybody's got conditioned by Fed speak to get accustomed to a target of 2% inflation. But that still is eroding everyone's dollar, right? Your purchasing power. 25 years of that, of 2% loss every year for 25 years, you lost half your dollar. Mm-hmm. And so the inflation target ought to be 0. And then the most striking chart I've seen is from Larry Summers, right? The, Harvard economist, MIT, very smart. And to his credit, a Democrat, head of the World Bank on the Democrat side, but he came out first against the Treasury Secretary over a year ago saying inflation is not transitory and we got a problem, Houston. And a few weeks ago, he put out another chart showing an exact mirror image of the current downward trajectory in inflation. But he had a 20-year cycle showing back another 20-year period in the not too distant past that shows a rapid increase going right up after the point we're at right now. So as we tick up a little bit, why did he put that out 2 weeks ago? He's seeing something that's a little hotter than the Fed is letting on. So keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were, pretty concerned. I mean, our small business owners obviously feel this impact, first and foremost, just like a consumer, because they don't have all the benefits of a large business, right? Forward purchase contracts, preferential inventory, alignments and stuff like that. So these guys were feeling and calling it out. They were already pulling back or at least stopping some of the hiring that they were doing because they knew that things were not getting better. And it's amazing how this administration, just loves to tell that tale of how things are getting better and that Bidenomics, is working. Right. I actually say, I'm so glad that he's taking credit for Bidenomics because I'm not sure which one's going to be, the biggest failure. Is it New Coke or is it Bidenomics? So I'm actually glad he's labeling it and taking credit for it because, the reality is I actually think things are going to start getting worse. I mean, you're the dean of the business school, so you completely understand how, costs work through the system. We're now going to be, working through, basically cost of goods that are actually more expensive, which means that the producer are actually going to have to take prices even higher again. So we actually see an uptick in inflation unless the Fed does something. I'm actually probably in the very, very minority that says the Fed might take a quarter rate increase in September.
I agree with that. I think they're gonna. And the White House messaging, right, ran into a little bit of a glitch with Jamie Dimon. His message just came out a couple days ago, and he said, whoever's saying this positive thing on the U.S. consumer and all this stuff, I don't know what they're talking about. There's some major headwinds. And the real economy, right? I mean, the Fed still has $8 trillion in M2 on their balance sheet.
Right.
And then we got $7 trillion U.S. budgets, right, with $2 trillion a year deficits, which are stimulative. And so that, increases the inflation worries too. It's just a matter of which wins out, right? The Fed is starting to, cut the money to supply. M2 is going down, but the fiscal stimulus is going way up, and it's just a matter of these lags, which are very hard to figure out when they all kick in. But when Dimon comes out and questions things, and then I taught economics for 20 years, and the leading economist on productivity in the United States is at Northwestern, Robert Gordon, and he's got productivity going down for 50 years in a row, and so that goes along with GDP per capita going down 50 years in a row, and Middle America knows this, right? It's not like they need to be told by us that the wage rates are stagnant. Right. And so this, we're still just propping up kind of a dead economy. And you can see that by just asking the simple question. If you took away $8 trillion on the Fed balance sheet and you took away $2 trillion in government spending, what would the real economy look like? Yeah. And I think everybody knows it would be a dire situation.
How can the Fed keep us from going into a recession? I mean, we've had all this aggressive interest rate increases, and all of this hurts our small businesses, obviously. Yep. But yet, as long as that recession keeps on, and in this case, ticking up, they're going to have to keep cranking up the interest rates.
Yeah.
And yeah, I am starting to hear people kind of predict that we might see another interest rate increase, but that's just more pain for our small businesses. I mean, we talk to them every day, and there's no credit for them to be had. I mean, they cannot get credit. It's just tightening up and tightening up for them.
Yeah.
And the administration just continues to just be tone deaf to the fact that small businesses are hurting tremendously, and they go out and tout the virtues of Bidenomics and how it's working.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the answer to what can the Fed do is don't get us in the ditch in the first place. Right. And so John Taylor at Stanford, who's the leading, monetary economist following Milton Friedman, said the Fed caused the 07-08 financial crisis, right? And everybody thinks, well, there was all sorts of corruption and, the mortgages, the ninja mortgages and the no income mortgages and the crazy stories. And I argued with him back then. I said, what about all this stuff? And he says, nope. If the Fed wouldn't have printed too much money, you couldn't have had all that malinvestment in the wrong sectors. And so after 07-08, everyone thought, well, certainly the Fed's going to learn its lesson. And it didn't. It messed up the major price in the economy, which is the interest rate. It's the price of money. And it kept it at roughly 0% for a decade. And so now, they created the everything bubble, and now they're trying to, wean us off of that. And so what can the Fed do? It's got to, put the horse back in the barn, as they say, when it comes to inflation. Otherwise, businesses will suffer even more with ongoing inflation. So the short run is painful, caused by the Fed, but they need to restore credibility and announce something like going on a Taylor rule, right? Which is the closest thing you're going to get to a gold standard without going to gold. And, that's a whole nother story we can talk about if your folks are interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about Liberty University and some of your students as dean of the business school. We hear a lot about colleges, and kids in college now are just moving more and more towards the left and embracing socialism. What do you hear from your students at Liberty?
Yeah, well, I'm just lucky to be here. And, Harvard's motto in 1640, when it was founded, John Harvard came over from Oxford, a fine, Christian school you may have heard of, and founds Harvard. And its motto was truth for Christ and church. And so we've just stuck to our knitting. That's still our motto. And we believe in all of the institutions that arrived, but not only in theory, but in practice, that have made capitalism and free market successful, as well as our people. And just the basics, the rule of law, a constitutional republic, rights language that protect people in business, the First Amendment on free speech and religious liberty. And then, some of the folks, I went to Princeton Seminary way back, but James Madison went there before me even, and he wrote our Constitution. Right. And so at Liberty University, our kids are just steeped in these basic traditions. And we still believe in truth with a capital T. Right. And, Veritas, that's still Harvard's motto. Thank God they dumped the church part and the religious aspects, but they still have truth in it. And if you're a university and you're not committed to the pursuit of truth, I don't know what you're really after. But I'll link, it to economics a little bit too. It's a little scary right now when you cannot find any economists writing on the major issues of our day, right? If you look to the border issues, illegality, constitutional basis, et cetera, not to mention the cartel issues and the trafficking issues, that's run amok. The China-Taiwan war has major economic implications. Rand had it at 5 to 10% of U.S. GDP hit if we go there, and 10 to 20% China hit. If just a Taiwan war, we're nothing with China, right? And so, and then the debt, we're 50 trillion in debt, according to CBO, in 10 years, in our 10-year business window. No economic analysis of any of this from the mainstream. And so, at Liberty, we just pursue the main questions that most people have on their minds. What about these issues? Why is the wage rate for the average worker been flat for 40 years? And the mainstream economists don't want to cover it because the truth is a little uncomfortable, right? The people paying their salaries and foundations want some other outcomes. And so the students at Liberty, we just pride ourselves. They're the most honest, ethical, hardworking. The work ethic is alive and well. And, I love my job. They keep me young on top of all that. So it's just a great work environment.
That is wonderful to hear. So I love to hear that you're talking supply side at Liberty.
Yep, you bet. Yes, absolutely. Just whatever's worked, right? The cookbook, China copies the cookbook, but then doesn't allow the rights and the constitutional government and the private property rights and all that. So I think they're in the middle of a crack up for real. Not just the demographic thing, right? But they have some debt issues and maybe a potential credit crisis. As a centralized regime, they're able to move capital around, but you can only do that for so long, as Japan found out in the 90s. So we'll see.
A lot of these other universities really are just kind of cranking out the fairy tales, quite frankly, that the administration likes to put out there. But the problem is these are our future, especially in the economics field and the finance fields. These are our future CFOs, economists. That's scary. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and you're right. And so it's these broader cultural issues that are defining the context here. Yeah. And ironically, the donors, right, the billionaire class and the capitalists are funding that ideology at present, which makes no sense other than the fact that a lot of our billionaire class, in the tech industry, for people that don't know, that top 7 firms in this country are worth more than all European countries combined. Not just in tech, right? To give you a sense of how powerful these firms are, but they're all monopolies, right? And so the first thing you learn in economics is you want a lot of demanders on the demand curve and a lot of firms on the supply curve. And that gives you all the good outcomes. And right now we're not setting markets up on that footing, and that is worrisome, and we're losing some of those benefits. And so, at Liberty, we're paying attention to the basics and sticking to our knitting.
So Dave, where do we go from here? We've got 70% of the country that thinks we're going in the wrong direction. How do we right the ship? Small businesses are being disproportionately hurt, as I mentioned, and employees or everyday ordinary Americans are getting poorer because inflation continues to outpace their wages. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and the polling is becoming very clear that we're having a major political realignment in this country along exactly the lines you just mentioned, with the middle class, right? Black, brown, blue collar workers, et cetera, who are being ignored and who are not sharing into benefits, right? If you take the average income, even between the billionaires and the folks in the lower middle class, the average doesn't do you any good, right? What matters is the median and what that median family is actually bringing in to pay for their kids' education and nutrition, et cetera. And so the way forward, the way I'm seeing the data, right, across these major issues we've been talking about, the economy and foreign policy and the Justice Department, equal application of justice, the rule of law, and all the political views here are just my own, but I don't really weigh into the politics too much. I just weigh into the American people. Right. And about 80% of the Republicans are in agreement with everything I just said. And then the fascinating thing is there's about 65% of independents who are on board on all those issues. And then even 35 to 40% of Democrats are looking our way, right? And the evidence there on this new populist, more people engaged politics is RFK Jr., sorry, on the Democrat side. And, he said, I've been canceled for 18 years. And the sitting president of the United States called big tech and told them to cancel me. And so you've got a broad swath of people from Republicans to independents and some Democrats who are saying, I don't like these trend lines the way they're going. And so what do we do about it? Well, we're going to see, right? I think the Democrats and the Independents and the Republicans and then this populist piece that's building. I think there is going to be a realignment back toward the middle class and just basic American values that made us great and that everybody ultimately believes in, except a very narrow band of people who are very vocal, but they're not very big, but they act like they're big. And I think the majority is learning that they've been misled by this smaller band of on the left.
Well, you were in Congress, Dave. I mean, it's got to feel like a different time when you look at what's happening now. I mean, do you see our elected representatives being able to come together and come up with some solutions that will help get us out of this mess and get this economy going? Or are we going to continue with gridlock and just partisan plays? And, and then we've got, what I sometimes call the fourth branch of the government, the media, that plays such a central role in sometimes lying to the American people about what's really happening.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that in there. I do not see right now some broad agreement across the spectrum. And ironically, I just went over the polling on the American people, right? 85%, 65%, 40%. But the one group that doesn't seem to be listening to the people are the politicians in many cases, right? There's exceptions to this, and the exceptions are growing who are starting to listen to the American people. But we'll see about the timing when the elections come and the politicians start hearing the footsteps, which I think they're going to. Maybe there is some hope there, right? That the politicians will finally wake up and go, the donors are important, but the American people are more important in taking care of the jobs and bringing jobs back to the USA and manufacturing and making stuff and getting a sound trading basis, just fair. All we want is just a fair shot of having our workers treated the way the rest of the world is treated. And so, I'm always hopeful, but right now there's no kumbaya up there, and I'm sure you guys are.
Yeah, there's definitely not. I mean,
right.
Like I said, I'm up here in DC right now, and it's just not happening. There's probably more polarization than ever. And I don't see an agreement happening. So 20, but that leads us to 2024.
Right.
So big election, obviously.
Yeah.
Without putting you on the spot or asking who you're, but what do you think is going to happen? I mean, the economy hasn't been doing great. So one would say, hey, it's a pocketbook election. But I think the Republicans thought that during the midterms and the social issues kind of overtook the economic issues. So what's your perspective on 24?
Yeah, well, I'll go back to 22 just for a minute. It should have been an economic referendum, but I've kind of complained about Republican leadership. It'll only be a referendum if our leadership gets out there with a megaphone and trumpets this stuff. Right. And I was in the Republican conference, and the Republican strategy is just to let, back when I was there was about 220 Republicans. Just you're on your own, run your own campaign, and the committee will send you some money, but you're on your own. And whereas the left has a very centralized, I don't like, total centralization, but on the messaging front, boy, they came out, right? And so they trumpeted some of the social issues and the healthcare issues in their entirety, which were nowhere near the top of the rung in polling, but they're centralized in their messaging. And so they come across as very powerful. And
right.
So this time I hope we get our ducks in a row. It looks like, there's a leading contender on the Republican side. Trump's way out in the lead on the primary side. And the Democrat side, Ignatius came out today and said no to Biden. And CNN and the White House is in shock. And so we'll see how that pans out, whether we get a California governor or another Michelle Obama, or I don't know. RFK's got 20% right now.
Right.
So who knows how that pans out. But it's going to be a crazy contest. On the political side, I usually don't venture there.
Right, right.
I just hope the Republicans get their act together in terms of messaging. And in terms of the big three, I always say, for me, I ran on the Virginia Republican creed. And I said, there's nothing wrong with that creed other than the fact that no Republicans follow it, right? It's got fiscal sanity and, equal and all this. And if the Republicans would just follow their own creed, it would go a lot better for us. And in the big three issues that I think have captured the base are China, and then the $50 trillion in debt, fiscal sanity, no more $2 trillion deficits per year, and then the border, some sanity. When the New York mayor is saying you're destroying my city, I think there's a little hint something's gone a little wrong.
Right. Those
are the big three issues I listen for leadership coming, anybody running for president. And I think the American people are actually listening to those three issues too. If they don't hear the truth coming, it's not going to be a good day for that candidate.
Yeah. I think I would probably throw in education in there as well, Dave.
Yeah, and the moms, right? Exactly. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah. I think that's a big deal overall. And it's funny because Elaine and I talk about the branding and messaging of the party all the time, and I kind of have this illustration where I take a Diet Coke can, which I actually happen to have here, and I talk about the left is so good, the liberals are so good about selling the front of that can, right? Open happiness light. That's all they're about. You don't need to know anything else. That's it.
Right. I know.
Right? But Republicans love selling the back of that can.
Right.
And I don't know if you've ever read the back of a can, Dave, of a Diet Coke. If you read those ingredients, you would never, ever buy another Diet Coke.
Don't talk about it.
Right. And I tell people, I'm like, imagine if Coke woke up and all of a sudden started selling the back of that can. It would be the last can of Diet Coke they'd ever sell. Right. But this is the way this is the way our party actually operates. Yep. Which is mind-boggling. As you know, I come from the consumer product goods background, Kraft, Nestle, right? I mean, I can't ever imagine having, 60 brands just do whatever you want, I mean, it's like, go crazy, know, and don't worry about any centralized branding. We don't need a CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. Just do what you want, and I'm sure it'll be great.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Yeah. No, I scratched my head, and then especially, right? Yeah, I was in there 14 to 18. It's very interesting times, right? And we promised we're going to repeal Obamacare and all. That was the one thing we said, and then we didn't end up doing that. And then we said, well, we need the Senate, and then we got the Senate, and we need the White House, and we got the White House.
Right.
And I was just stunned. There was no strategic leadership. Okay, hey guys, I was like, who's in charge? And I was like, where are our top three issues? What are they? And you're in Congress, right? You're supposed to be leading the world. And foreign policy, I never heard a discussion at all on anything.
Yeah.
And I at least want to hear, competing claims. But I was just in stunned disbelief at the lack of organization around our messaging, but more important, our content. What are we going to do to help the American people? And everybody's aching to hear it because our side has the right content, the right message, the right values and virtues, the right free market philosophy. We believe in the American people, and we just cannot, like you said, put it clearly to the American people.
We cannot package a vision.
Yeah,
I mean, the last time that I honestly think that was done is with Newt Gingrich and his contract with America.
It was great. That's a contract, right? There it is. Here it is, 10 planks, and here's what we're running on. That's what we need.
And in fact, actually, Newt Gingrich and JCN actually teamed up at the end of last year, and we introduced the American Small Business Prosperity Plan, which is 8 basic points on what needs to be done to make sure that our American small businesses are successful. And I'll tell you what, Dave, that within those 8, there's current legislation either being proposed or, being discussed in some way, shape, or form. But it's so spread out and random and not communicated well that we just basically took those and bundled them to the American Small Business Prosperity Plan. And that's our contract with American small businesses. We need to do more of that. And I just don't understand why we don't get it.
Yeah. No, it's just very hard. When you're up there, it is a tough job. Right now, you see the headlines, right? I mean, you've got impeachment, HR2 border crisis, $7 trillion funding thing. Russ Vogt started off cutting 17 trillion out of the 50. We ended up down the Freedom Caucus at 4 trillion. And then, we go up to the White House and give it all away in zero cuts. Right. And so the American people are just scratching their head. That's what we chose to focus on. And we didn't focus on the Job Creators Network platform. And we got nothing out of that. And then people get very frustrated, and we got to pump them up again. So plaudits to you guys. Keep doing what you're doing, because the job creators that is the key for the American people.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Elaine. Thanks, Alfredo. No, I love what you guys do and the way you do it. And so keep the faith, and the American people will be very grateful to all of your hard work.
Thank you, Dave.
And please subscribe to the show at SalemPodcastNetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts from.